What is going on, guys? My name is Daniel. Welcome to New Note Reviews, and today I'll be reviewing the fourth album by the band La Dispute titled Panorama.
Second in the light, I wait for a moment when the weather breaks. I can feel you in the mattress shake. I can see the way an old pain holds you. Morning falling in the fray.
This album really brought me back to my old emo and punk days when I used to listen to emo and punk records at like 1 in the morning when I was scrolling through Tumblr. It was also around the time Wildlife by these guys had just come out, and I remember thinking that whole part in the song King Park where Jordan says, "Can I still get into heaven if I kill myself?" was like one of the deepest and like most hard-hitting lines I had ever heard in my life because I was 14 and full of angst. But I can still remember the first time I heard these guys, and it was from their first album, and the song was called Such Small Hands, and it was the intro to that album, and it was a very different thing than I had ever heard before. The intro was very melodic and very melancholic and kind of daunting in a way. And then Jordan's vocals came in, and it was something I had never heard before on a record at all. It was that whiny, like screaming but not really wailing type vocal delivery. I don't know. It was very weird, and I didn't know what he was talking about either because it was like a poem. Everything he says in any of his songs reads like poetry instead of just a regular song structure of either singing or kind of screaming different obscure lyrics. I'm not sure. He makes sure to tell a story regardless of what he says, but he continues to paint pictures and describes everything that he possibly can in each one of his songs. So when I heard Such Small Hands and he goes, "I think I saw you in my sleep, darling," I was kind of thrown off guard and kind of turned off from this band for a while because I couldn't get used to that whining. But then I started listening to Pierce the Veil, who also had a very whiny vocalist, and I kind of started to like it, and it was very interesting to me, and I ended up listening to La Dispute again and learning to love their music, and they really grew on me, and yeah, I've been a fan of the band ever since. So the intro to this band is that they formed in 2004, and since then have only released 4 studio albums, this one, Panorama, being the 4th, and 1 EP titled Vancouver. Their current lineup is Jordan Dreyer on lead vocals, Corey Straffolino and Chad Sternberg on guitar, Adam Vass on bass, and Brad Vanderlook on drums. As I said, I've liked this band for years, but their previous release from 2014, Rooms of the House, was very underwhelming for me. But it's been 5 years. They've had a lot of time to think of new ideas. They've had a lot of time to evolve their sound. So let's jump into the review and see how this new album stacks up. The album begins with a slow melodic intro, much like many of their other albums, but this one, the first track called Rose Quartz, there's no vocals on it. It's just a atmospheric style type intro, and I think it just prepares you for what the rest of the album is going to sound like and what you're kind of going into when you're listening to the album. The next 2 tracks I'm going to put together because it's Fulton Street 1 and Fulton Street 2, and this whole album, from what I've read in an interview by Kerrang, where they talked to Jordan, the vocalist of this band, is that it has to do with a lot of love and loss and different stories from a certain area in Michigan. From what I understand, it has to do with things that took place on a street and kind of Jordan's place in those things and his feelings as a spectator. I use spectators in quotes because he was never actually present during any of these things, or at least not all of them, and he kind of makes up these stories about him being there and what he would feel in these moments and how other people felt in the moments of these certain things going on this street in Michigan. And Fulton Street, these 2 Fulton Street tracks kind of introduce you to what he was thinking on a drive down the street with his significant other, and what he was feeling, what he was thinking, and the different aspects of his worldview get into these tracks. And they're very melodic, they're very whiny. He begins the first track with spoken word vocals. He doesn't really start screaming or whining right off the bat. He kind of just speaks in to the track, and he starts, and then from there he starts building up, building up, building up until he's screaming, and he is belting out the lyrics that he is known for. These two tracks are actually very complex compared to some of the other things the band has done in the past. It's like they're getting very technical. It almost makes me think of like a prog rock type thing going on, but not quite that. It's still that melodic hardcore sound. It's just worked around in a different way to where they have some good bass grooves in there and some good melodic notes going on throughout the track. Another track I want to talk about is Anxiety Panorama. It's about the anxiety one feels when dealing with grief and grieving over a loved one especially, and this sense of unease that you get because you know you can't bring that person back, but you want to do something, you want to be able to do something or feel something in that moment, and that's what the song is about. This is also another one of the tracks, like many of the others on the record, where Jordan speaks with a spoken word intro at the very beginning, and I want to take a moment to kind of rant about that because a lot of the tracks start like that, and when you hear them, you're like, I don't know what Jordan's saying, so you turn your volume up, and you can finally hear him, but then right after that, a chord hits you real hard, and the guitars start going, and then he starts screaming, and you gotta turn your volume all the way back down again because it got really loud. So that's just one little quirk I have with it, is that it's just kind of off production-wise. Other than that, though, I mean, the structures of the songs are a lot like that. They kind of go from this slow melodic sound to this belting, loud, harsh sounding song. However, none of the songs necessarily have any kind of crunch or harshness, in the way of like distortion or anything like that. They're very clean. They're very clean guitars. They're very melodic sounding. They're very fresh and open. A lot of it is just kind of simple chord progressions and easy plucking, and they make sure not to kind of make it too heavy. They don't really make it heavy at all. Actually, it's more of a it's very melodic hardcore. It's very peaceful sounding in a way, even though it gets kind of dark. Views from Our Bedroom Window is probably the best track on this album. It kind of reminds me of their old sound, and I know I said that in my Children of Bodom review also, that I really like their old sound, and I'm saying this for this band too, but that's not always true. I'm not trying to sound very pretentious with that. I know bands have to grow and expand to stay relevant, and I'm not knocking this band for trying different things, but track 7 really got me back into that feel of, yes, this is La Dispute. Yes, this is what these guys do, and this is how they make things work for them. The track opens and Jordan starts belting out with lyrics, and the guitars are going real fast and real heavy, and it's a very interesting take. It's a very interesting song, especially when everything else is kind of layered differently and everything is kind of structured in different ways. They really got technical with this album, and that's not a bad thing. This isn't a bad album. They just make a lot of different creative choices that I don't necessarily find all that great, but they are still good. So as I said, a lot of the songs are formulaic, and that really hurts this album, but I do want to emphasize the fact that there are good things about this album too. I mean, it sounds good. What they do instrumentally sounds really good. The lyrics and the delivery for a lot of them are really good. There is a lot of imagery that Jordan puts into his lyrics and a lot of emotion that he puts into his vocal style, and that I always respect him for that. He always delivers with some of the harshest vocals he can possibly give. I want to talk about the last track on this album though, because it was probably one of the most anticlimactic tracks they've ever written. I like it for the fact that it's a slow progression. It's 7 minutes, and it just builds up from like the first part. Every minute it starts to get a little louder, a little more crazy, a few more ideas come into play, whether it be with the guitars, with the drums, or maybe some keyboards, or I don't think they put the trumpet in this song, but they put a trumpet in one of their songs, and it works really well for them. But Jordan continues to like slowly build up with this song as well, and I just don't think it ends that great. I think it ends well for the concept of the album, but musically as a whole, it's okay. It's not fantastic. It's not the best thing they've ever done. The best thing they've ever done is probably the 12-minute song on their first album, where he just goes into a bunch of different things lyrically that I just, crazy. Sorry for the voice crack. I'm getting over a cold. Anyway, the production of this album is pretty good. There's a lot of different things that they tried with this album. Like I said, they got more technical with it. I definitely like it better than Rooms of the House, but I don't like it better than their first album or Wildlife, because it just doesn't, I just don't think it stacks up as well. Again, as I said, bands must evolve and grow, but they did it in a way that I'm just not digging that well. And for that reason, it's a pretty forgettable album for me, honestly. It's not that great. I'm going to give it a 4. It's a 4. 4 out of 10. 4 wines, 4 darlings, 4 whatever out of 10. As for suggestions, I suggest you go listen to their first album, Somewhere at the Bottom of the River Between Vega and Altair. That's why I've been avoiding saying it this whole time. I've just been saying their first album, but it's a very long title, and I didn't want to say it, but for a suggestion, I suggest you go listen to their first album. I think you'd like it a lot more than this one. However, go listen to this one. Tell me what you think. I could be wrong. You can completely disagree with me. That's fine, but go listen to the first album and let me know what you think. Another album I suggest is Modern Baseball's 2014 release, You're Gonna Miss It All. It's not in the same vein as La Dispute at all. They're in kind of a league of their own, honestly, when it comes to this stuff. But if you still want that sad-sounding, melancholic, emo sound, go check out Modern Baseball's You're Gonna Miss It All. They have that whine in their vocals, that nasally type delivery, and it's a very good album. I suggest you go listen to it. Lastly, I suggest you go listen to Touche Amore's Parting the Sea Between Brightness and Me album. That is one of my favorite melodic hardcore albums. It is a great album from start to finish. It's very short, but as far as melodic hardcore goes, these guys did it very right on this album. It is fantastic. I cannot say enough good things about it. Some of the lyrics are a little dated, I understand, especially for older crowds, but it's still a very good album, instrumentally and vocally, and I suggest you go listen to it. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, consider leaving a like, comment, let me know what you think about the album or about my review. Give me reviews to do. Tell me what you want me to review next. And consider subscribing. Share this video with your friends. Tell them about me. Help me grow. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.